Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you are having a wonderful week. I hope you've been able to get outside and, enjoy the wonderful, cool weather that we have been having. I guess it was yesterday, maybe it was Monday morning. I walked outside to get, I think it was Monday morning because that's when I got the garbage cans. And, there was a little bit of a crispness in the air. And so we are finally starting to really get some pumpkin spice weather. So fall is hopefully approaching soon. If I love fall, it's one of my favorite times of the year. I hope that God has been a blessing to you this week. In fact, I think it's safe to say that God has been a blessing to all of us this week in some form or fashion. Maybe He's blessed us with an opportunity to share the gospel, to talk to somebody about Jesus. Maybe He's helped you to find a $20 bill that was hidden in a back pocket that you've washed in a pair of jeans that you've washed two or three times. Maybe He's allowed you to show kindness to a stranger, or perhaps someone showed you kindness that you didn't even know them, but you received kindness from them. In some way, God has blessed all of us, and so we want to always give thanks to God for His many wonderful and often unknown blessings that He pours out into our lives. And so I pray that you are receiving those blessings and you are taking those blessings and extending them to others. Let me remind everybody that if you do have a prayer request, please get those to me by tomorrow, whether that's through email or text, and I will get those into the Finally Friday email. If you're visiting with us, if this is maybe your first time watching our Wednesday evening Bible study, thank you for being here. I hope this blesses you in some way. If you have a prayer request, you can go to our website. It's vcofc.org. And there in the bottom right hand corner is a contact us link. You can click that link and it'll take you to a page. Just fill out the information with any prayer requests that you might have. And the Versailles Church of Christ will gladly keep you and your loved ones in all of our prayers. What would you do if you found out your bank was going to start putting $86,000 into your bank account every single day? Now, there was no carryover balance. You could take this money and you could spend it however you wanted to, but you couldn't keep any of it. And what I mean by that is the $86 would go in every morning, and then every night it would be removed or basically replenished to where there was $86,000. You couldn't save it. It wouldn't roll over, but every day you had $86,000. I don't know who that is. Spam. You had $86 that you could draw out and you could spend it. What would you do with it? We all have a bank. It's called time. Every morning, time credits each one of us with around 86,400 seconds. And every night, it rules off whatever amount of time you didn't use, whatever amount of time you failed to invest. There's no carryover, there's no balance, there's no overdraft. Each day starts a new account with a fresh amount of seconds for you to use. And if you fail to lose that day's deposits, well, then it's your lost. You don't get it back. You can't draw against tomorrow. It's gone. Jesus makes a similar point with the parable that we find in Luke chapter 12. I'm talking about the parable of the rich fool. So if you want to read along with me, we're going to look at verses 16 through 21 of Luke chapter 12. And Jesus told them a parable, saying, The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. Luke chapter 12, the entire chapter is a really interesting chapter. I mean, there's so many different layers that Luke puts into this one chapter alone. I mean, Jesus, He deals with issues such as fear and anxiety and security. He tells people in verses 4 and 5 that, they don't, of exactly who they don't need to be afraid of and who they should be afraid of. He says, I tell you, my friends, do not fear those who kill the body and after that have nothing more they can do, but I warn you whom to fear. Fear him who, after he is killed, has authority to cast into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Jesus said, don't worry about people. If you want somebody to fear God. And yet, at the same time, he says, don't be afraid of God because God is bringing the kingdom to you. Jesus talks about division. In verses 13 and 14, we have a guy coming to Jesus saying, hey, tell my brother to divide my inheritance with me. Well, Jesus, he rejects the role. No, I'm not going to be an arbiter, if that's the right term for it. I'm not going to be a judge to kind of figure out who's got what. Yet, if we go to the end of the chapter, verses 51 through 53, Jesus talks about how he came not to bring peace, but division. So then there's a lot going on in Luke chapter 12, but we're going to really focus in tonight just for a few minutes on our text, verses 16 through 20. Now, I didn't do the bonus Tuesday trivia last week, so I've got one for this week. The parable of the rich fool. In the story itself, you have the rich fool and you have God. Those are kind of the two characters of the narration. So here's a true or false question. This is the only parable of Jesus that has God appearing as an actual character in the story. True or false? One more time. This is the only parable that Jesus gives where God appears as an actual character in the story. Is that a true statement or is it a false statement? We'll see how many get that one right. You've got a 50-50 shot. So, this parable comes about because we find someone in the crowd. I mean, the beginning of the chapter, it says that many thousands of people were gathered together. Jesus kind of brings out the leaven of the Pharisees here, but then we jump forward to verse 13, and someone in the crowd hollered out to Jesus, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Teachers and those in positions of authority, those who understood the law, who interpreted the law, were viewed as the ones that you would go to adjudicate such matters of inheritances and divisions and dealing with the law because they knew the law. We know Deuteronomy 21 tells us that the oldest son, he receives a double portion of the inheritance and then it's split among everybody else. Some have suggested that the guy that's speaking out in verse 13 is the younger brother. And he's saying, hey, the older brother doesn't want to divide the inheritance, or he's withholding part of it for me. And, maybe he thinks, that because Jesus is a good teacher and, his brother's in the wrong, then he's got justice on his side. But as the case many times, Jesus does not really direct to answer the question per se. He's like, you really need to think about what this says about you. Look at yourselves first is how he responds, because he tells them a parable. He tells them a parable, and we want to focus in on this parable and say, well, it's about being greedy and about being rich. It's about building a life that's around possessions. That's a foolish thing to do, and there's some validity to all those things. But I would suggest to you that this parable, it really speaks to the uncertainty of life. It speaks to the uncertainty of life. It speaks to the reality of God's judgment, especially on those who don't understand the real purpose for life, who trust only in their own wealth. They find out what that really gets them. Let's read the parable again, and this time, keep in mind, think about the rich man and how he perceives stuff, how he perceives his stuff. The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God. How much control did the rich man actually have over his own life? Not really much at all, despite what he may have thought. Where did his prosperity really come from? If we take just the parable itself, well, it wasn't anything he did. It was the land that had prospered. The land produced plentifully. Nothing is said of the rich man working the land. I mean, the rich man, he goes so far to even think that he is the one that possesses his own soul. The reality is that his soul is on loan to him, and the one who loaned him the soul can repossess that soul at any time he chooses. Now, up until verse 20, if we just read verses 16 through 19, it doesn't say the man was a bad person, negative person. It just talks about, hey, he's been blessed. He's owned land that produced plentifully. He's going to store up things for a rainy day. He's going to build bigger barns where he can put it all. He's going to retire in comfort. So why does God call him a fool? Is it because he failed to plan for life after death? Is it because he was too self-centered and he ignored the needs of others? You know, we kind of want to put this parable side by side with the story of the rich man and Lazarus. It doesn't say he was or wasn't. But I believe what we can say for certain is the man ignored God. He was not rich towards the Lord. He left God out of the picture. There's nothing that even gives us a hint that God was even offered thanks for all the many blessings that he'd give. No, the man built a life around his possessions to the point that he saw them as his security. They were his security blanket. Life is going to be good because I have all this stuff, and I have so much stuff, I need to build bigger storage containers to hold all my stuff. But we read the parable, and possessions don't give security. Life isn't just about accumulating stuff. I mean, in fact, you take the rich man. This rich man here in this parable is a complete contrast to what Jesus says back in Luke chapter 9. In Luke chapter 9, Jesus talks about what it means to be his disciple. He said to all in verse 23, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. Life isn't just supposed to be about us as individuals and about accumulating wealth and prosperity and popularity. Life is about God, coming to know God, coming to understand God, being able to follow God, his will, his purpose. The rich fool didn't do any of that. His focus was on himself. And he found out in the end that all of his possessions, those big buildings he built to store everything, they were all simply an illusion because they had no bearing on his eternal security. They couldn't do anything on it. So we read the parable. Does the parable poke at your heart? Does it twist your heart a little bit? It should. I mean, if we're honest with ourselves as we read this parable, there's a part of us, there's a part of me. I desire to be like the rich fool. I want to be able to tell myself, I've worked hard. I've lived a life of, I've worked, I've gathered up many good things. I have a big 401k retirement plan. I put money into stocks. My mortgage is paid off. I can kick back and celebrate. That's the American dream. The American dream is built on personal security and pleasure found in how much we can hold on to. And Jesus, this guy came forward, hey, get my brother to divide the inheritance. And Jesus is like, look, don't be coveting. Life, what does he say in verse 15? Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Personal possessions are one of the chief obstacles to our eternal salvation and the relationship that you and I have with God. Now, they're not sinful. They're not inherently sinful. We need things to make it through this life. We need things in how we serve God. We can use the possessions that we have to glorify God and to serve Him and serve others. So on the one hand, there's nothing wrong with earthly things, earthly wealth, earthly possessions. But the fault lies on us. The fault lies on how tightly we cling to such things and where our focus is. I love my grandma Summerall. She passed away a number of years ago. And grandma loved her antiques to the point that she had a lot of them. But when she passed from this world, those antiques, well, they stayed in the world and she went on. Our focus must always be on God. Because if our focus is on God, that will determine what we do with our stuff. If we focus on the stuff, then we're not focusing on God, and that will determine, isn't the rich fool, that will determine where our soul will go when we stand before our Heavenly Father. Would you bow with me as we close? Our most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for all the many blessings that you give us. The opportunities that you give us to share the gospel, the opportunities you give us to show kindness and love towards others, the many possessions that you give all of us, Father. Possessions that help us to live, to have a home and to stay warm and dry and have nourishment and food and find joy in this world. But Father, please help us to keep our focus on you always. To not get caught up in the things of the world, the possessions of the world, and allow them to direct where our eternal home will be. Let us always let you be first in our hearts and in our minds, Father. And let our relationship with you always be first in everything that we do. Thank you for Jesus, and thank you for his life and his example and his teachings and how he helps us to grow in our relationship with you. Be with those that we care about, Father. Guide us and direct us. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Hope you have a great rest of the week. I checked the weather this morning. It looks to be a beautiful weekend. Get out, enjoy it, spend time with your family and friends. Share a blessing with someone. Tell them about Jesus. Tell them how much you value their friendship, how much you appreciate them. Pay the guy's coffee that's behind you in the drive-thru line. Do a kindness for someone. Lord willing, we will gather together this coming Sunday for worship. We are gathering at the building at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Social distancing guidelines are still in place. We want to be mindful of our brothers and sisters and to their needs, and we want to protect them. So if you can be here, great. If not, you can join us via our live stream. I'm always thankful for your attendance either way. God bless and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.